Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not John Corbett, so we don't usually meet at 8 o'clock, but I want to welcome y'all here this morning. And if it looks like I have sand in my eyes, it's not because of anything I might have had to drink last night, but it's because of the pollen. All right, we have a bill that we had postponed to this morning for our illustrious chairman of ethics. And I think this is a very ethical bill. All right, if you would go to the podium up there, sir. At the behest of one of our committee members the other day, there were some questions raised about a lot of the things that we do. We needed to put certain requirements in here, statutory requirements about dealing with this. And I think that's been done in this substitute in front of you. So if you would quickly go through the premise of the bill that you presented the other day quickly, and then go over the changes, and let's see what the committee wishes.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're working off LC 47233-4S. This bill is an attempt to replace lost ad valorem tax revenue in McIntosh County because the state owns over 66,000 acres of the most valuable land in the state of Georgia. It's beaches and rivers and marshes, and because of that, their digest is tremendously impacted, and they barely have enough tax money to operate any kind of government. And because of that fact, McIntosh County struggles. As a matter of fact, McIntosh County is the only county on the east coast of the United States that lost population last year. So this bill simply allows the Secretary of State to license any county in the state of Georgia to operate a bingo game if within that county the state owns more than 60,000 acres of land. That's it, and if it pleases the chair, I would ask our attorney and former legislative counsel, Jimmy McDonald, to explain the changes in this substitute.
Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you for this opportunity. At your direction, Chairman Carpenter and others asked me to do some research this a couple days ago and try to put together a statutory framework for regulating this game a little bit more further than what it was in the original. The original bill simply delegated to the Secretary of State, but what the committee's wish is to have more statutory parameters and guidance, a roadmap, so to speak. If I can direct you to line 117, code section, the proposed code section 161253.2. This code section in its entirety would serve as the statutory guidelines for the Secretary of State to further go more narrow if it deems necessary to regulate these machines. Because what we are talking about here really are machines and not anything that involves a human dealer or other games of skill. These are purely games of chance, and what we're talking about is the authenticity of the machines is what we need to make sure is confirmed in the right place. What I did is I researched across the state, other states that are similarly situated, Mississippi, Arkansas, about 2 others, and took really from their rules and regs regarding how they establish the guidelines for the machines. Beginning with subsection A, it requires that before any machine can be sold, leased, or otherwise distributed in the state of Georgia, the Secretary of State shall inspect it and ensure that it complies with whatever guidelines or standards it establishes for those, and then that process will continue thereafter, even after it's in place. Subsection B allows that, continues on that part and says that at any time of its choosing, the Secretary of State may enter and continue to inspect it or continue to confirm that it's in compliance with any of its guidelines. Subsection C just says that if it discovers there's any problem that affects the security and integrity of the bingo game or its system, that machine or in that location will immediately cease to be operating it, and steps will be taken by the Secretary of State to either bring it back into compliance or take whatever steps it deems necessary to deter any further actions that were not in compliance. Subsection D is a record-keeping requirement that must maintain a log showing the date, model, serial number of every machine that's in use at the facility, and that needs to be recorded monthly to the Secretary of State, so that we have an inventory and we know exactly what is being utilized by the facility for the purposes of administering a bingo game. Subsection F is another is a record keeping, while the other is more in compliance, submitting to Secretary of State. The licensee will have to maintain those records for a period of time that the Secretary of State deems appropriate for, well, as long as the licensee is active in the participation of the game. Subsection D just simply says that no location may display or use or otherwise furnish a device that has been marked, defaced, or tampered with. If there's any indication that it could be defective or something falls on it or anything that could bring into question whether the veracity of the machine is in place, or is in good standing, that it has to be removed from the floor. Subsection I is significant, that no machine shall be capable of dispensing any currency or have any type of automatic payout. Subsection J was the record-keeping requirement that each payout that's ever made by of the facility must be kept at record and submitted to the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State may continue to inspect those records ongoing at any point. Subsection K is talking about when they must create a receipt for any payout that they give to a consumer, and then lines 162 through 170 enumerate and list exactly what that receipt has to entail. That because of the importance of this and making sure that the guidelines really were being given for the machines themselves, that's where this is the emphasis on. But in addition to that, line 171 through 173 further empowers Secretary of State to more narrowly or expand what the rules and regs that it promulgates in order to ensure that this game is being administered and regulated properly by the state. Again, I'll stress that most of this was taken from what I found in the state of Mississippi, which is probably the closest thing to what we're trying to replicate here to a certain extent, scaled significantly down. But this is taken from their regulatory scheme.
Very good. All right. If I might, Chairman Ridley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question from a friend up there. Just to make this clear, this is already in law. It's been in law since the 80s that if you have land, I think it was over 20,000 acres, and y'all went up to even 50,000 acres, which even really cuts it even down even less people than that, then you could do this game. Isn't that correct?
No, sir. What that statute says is that if you have more than 20,000 acres, that for the maintenance of that land, the state could reimburse you basically for having to maintain that land. But there's nothing in that statute that allows for any type of compensation or anything that makes a county who's lost that much of acreage whole. What this is an attempt to do is, what it's basically doing is setting the premise that this is, we need to stress that McIntosh County or none of these counties contest the policy that these 60,000 acres shouldn't be conserved. We're proud of that. But when these are economically impacted acreages and the state chooses to take that policy by removing that much of potential development and revenue generation for a county, this is just simply saying that when you meet that threshold, that we're going to try to open a door for you to supplement and mitigate the loss that you're doing as a result of a state policy. That's the reason why federal land's not in here. This is the state-owned property.
That's correct.
So this is just one little tool that we're trying to give a county that's frankly depressed. I mean, we were given a stat yesterday that McIntosh County currently has the second lowest early mortality rate in the state. Second highest. What I mean is the second high, and lowest in the sense of the second worst, but there's only one county in the entire state that has a higher early mortality rate than McIntosh County. The state recently closed our DFACS office. We're shrinking, we're dying, and it's not because we're poorly run. It's just we're trying to do what other counties are doing with 1.5 arms tied behind our back.
All right. Well, the reason I asked that, we were talking about it the other day. What I'm talking about, this statute has been in since when?
The bingo statute has been in since 1983.
Okay, that's
So
what I thought.
bingo has been constitutional since the 70s actually. In 1983, the Constitution was rewritten, as all we know, across the board. When it did so, it was broadened out and the power given to the General Assembly to define what's nonprofit, and on its face says that bingo is a constitutional game. So bingo in and of itself has been constitutional since the 70s. This is just simply saying that a governmental entity that has a depressed tax base serves as a nonprofit.
Okay, so let me, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes, sir.
What I'm trying to say is this, like you said, this statute has been in since 1983. It was 20,000 acres. Y'all have made it 50,000 acres.
For this purpose, yes.
Okay. If you'll pay attention to line 228, I think that's right. Yes. Do we need to adjust that for, I mean, if that was the, if
No,
that
sir.
was the,
No, sir, because if you go to line 246, all that is current law. Line 246 simply says that that is applying to a nonprofit bingo game in its current format, which is basically what you would see at a American Legion Hall or something like that. Subsection J pulls us out of it.
okay,
and,
so.
and basically pulls us into the code section I just went over.
Okay, so 228 won't apply then?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you.
And if I may just make a net distinction, Mr. Chairman, what we're trying to do here is supplement a governmental entity. So the reason that there isn't those caps and why it's not necessary is we're not trying to raise money on the scale of a local American Legion. We're trying to do it on a county-wide level in order to help supplement the funding for schools. So we're trying to, we have to scale this up. It's the same game, it's the same premise, but we're just trying to scale it up to a way where it helps the government.
I got you.
All right, well, you've done pretty good with that, man, as you're talking it to death.
Well, you can't take the lawyer out of me, sir, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Just a quick question for clarification. Other than McIntosh County, how many counties would qualify for this?
Other counties could potentially qualify if they had more of their acreage taken in. At this point, McIntosh County would be the only county that has more than 50,000 acres.
Understood. Thank you.
All right. Number 22, Dr. Williams, I do believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on line 235. What this indicates is that only currently employed or people that are employed by the county will run this operation because it kind of indicates there won't be any people hired or what?
235 is current law and would apply to, again, the nonprofit bingo game that's currently in place. 235 would not apply to our current situation.
Okay, good. And one further, Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I'd like to make the earliest motion I've ever made since I've been in the legislature.
Well, I have no doubt that won't be the earliest motion you've ever made, but at the proper time. All right, Dr. Washburn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think it's a good bill. It's a creative bill. That I just did some quick math over here using rough estimates, and that 66,000 acres being untaxed is certainly significant to McIntosh County. I'm just curious, and I know these would be just estimates, but and I'm sorry I missed the first hearing on this. Do you have just an idea of what kind of revenue it will produce for the county? I'm just curious about that. I'm in support of the bill.
We have an aspirational idea. I think it's impossible to know, but if this ultimately netted the county anywhere between $2 and $4 million a year, you'd have to understand that represents almost 40% of the McIntosh County budget. And what you would find is they're committed to wanting to split that with the schools. I think what McIntosh County understands is until it improves its schools, its healthcare, and its infrastructure, the idea of bringing anything else to the county on any level is it's a pipe dream. But because the county's having such trouble with its basic functions, and again, not because it's a poorly run county, and it has some of the most valuable natural resources. I hate to say this, one of my favorite places on earth is St. Simon's Island. Okay, you look at St. Simon's, there is absolutely no reason why Sapelo could not be St. Simon's. It has just as beautiful beaches. We're proud that Sapelo hasn't been touched. It's a gem, and there's a good reason for that. But the idea that we couldn't develop and do something with Sapelo the same way St. Simon's has been, you can't ignore the fact that it hasn't economically impacted the potential for what McIntosh County could be. And that's all this is doing. We're trying to find a way to find just another revenue stream in order to provide the most basic needs to the county.
I don't know if I would be saying all of that because Sapelo-Hammock, McIntosh County is such a beautiful place down there. You know, while St. Simon certainly has its charm,
Yes,
I
sir.
don't know that y'all need to actually go that far.
Oh, no,
because then you
we don't
destroy
want
the-
to. Let me
you
make clear,
destroy
we
the
don't
natural-
want to. Nobody
The natural
the
beauty of
reason we're
that
looking for this type
area.
of solution is nobody wants to.
All right, I don't see any other questions. Let me just, for the committee's benefit, I'll see if I can't just bring it down to the lick log on this. In response to Chairman Ridley's idea a while ago, there's actually two issues that are involved here. Bingo is legal. There's only two forms of gambling cash payouts in this state that have been approved by the voters by a constitutional amendment. One is the Georgia lottery and the other is this bingo statute. It's been around for quite a while, and it is what it is. So it is approved by the voters, by the Constitution of the state. Now, the other part is the statutes in here that we can change any statute we want to. You need to understand that. The way this bill is drafted, it's drafted specifically for one impoverished county that has lost and has never been able to get the revenue off of the lost lands that the state of Georgia owns. And this would be to supplant that. And that's that part of it. The other part of this, and I just lost my dang train of thought, I'm sorry. But the other part to this deals with the taxation and such. So yes, they do have the authorization. The substitute you see after the questions in the committee the other day, at the wisdom of Chairman Jaspers, he made note that there was no statutory regulations in here to move forward, and he was exactly right. That's what's in this bill here. Now, I will tell you at any particular point, this is going to be a long haul for the chairman. I will commend him because he's doing what we're supposed to. He's looking after his local constituents and his local government. Where it goes from here, if it's the will of this committee, then that's going to be up to him and possibly the people of this state, not only in his region, but other parts of the state. That being said, Dr. Williams, you are recognized for a motion.
After a small yawn, I do move for due pass.
We have a motion and we have an energetic second down there. Is there any further discussion? If there's no discussion, no questions. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? May we all raise our hands and say bingo.
Bingo.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to make a comment to the people in attendance here this morning. We have on the table the ticket brokering bill by Representative Hilton. After consultation with Representative Hilton, he finally decided that he had been beat down and demonized enough that he asked me to hold the bill. At the discretion of the chair, we're going to hold this bill on the table. But during the interim, we will be having some hearings. I may not have been as forceful in my comments the other day. I know a little bit about ticket brokering since I passed that bill 4 times back in the 90s. I understand the money. I understand the influence that comes from these sports teams, entertainment venues, and all else. But this is probably one of the most clouded issues there are. You have one company that has a virtual monopoly. You have secondary sellers out there. But at the end of the day, I've always maintained that every person has a right to sell their personal ticket as long as it's their personal ticket and was not gained for the express purpose of creating a profit. Nothing wrong with making a profit. But this idea that y'all heard about botting and stuff like that, this whole industry has changed so much with the blessings of technology. And I don't necessarily think it's a good thing. But I want to implore the committee members that prior to whatever time in the interim that we meet again to start looking over this. I would recommend that y'all start taking a good look at this issue itself, so that hopefully when we come back that we'll be able to look at it logically without the undue influence of those people who Unless the Braves actually do something and go to the series, y'all might be giving, somebody might give y'all tickets to the series. If they do that, I hope you'll have enough class that you won't try to sell them. So, any other questions? Mr. Ridley, I see you waving your finger.
I had a great thought this morning about how to fix the botting issue and that. Some other states have a cap. You can't sell it for more than 25% of the face value of the ticket. That stops
Well,
everything.
We don't want to start clouding it before we even get out of the session, but that's the comments on this. My thanks to Representative Hilton, because we could be here for quite a while dealing with this issue. But it's something that's going to, I don't know that we're going to be able to do anything we do that's going to make any difference. It is my suspicions that even though the federal government in its typical style, they don't enforce any of the laws about anything when it comes to the botting and this type of stuff. But at some point, regardless of what this legislature does, there'll probably wind up being there'll probably be litigation at some point about monopolistic practices and such like that. Whether it does or not during our time, who knows? But I want to commend the committee for their vigorous questions the other day, and be prepared for them sometime during the interim that we'll be taking this issue back up just to start studying it. Now, I don't know that anybody wants a study committee per se. We may leave this in committee and do it that way. That being said, is there any other business from the committee members? I do want to remind you, you have a committee dinner next Tuesday night, day after crossover. And please let Jan know. And by the way, I forgot to introduce Amber. She's sitting in today for Brian. He has the unholy duty that he also looks after judiciary, and we know all about that. And I'm glad to see her today, and as always, we thank Jan for keeping us on course. If there's no other questions, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.